Everything. It's everything. I mean, the Canada, U.S., and Mexico are the most integrated economies in the world, and U.S. and China are the biggest trading partners in the world. So it's literally everything. I mean, it's autos, it's agriculture, it's beef, it's alcohol, it's every toys, pharmaceuticals. It's everything.
So when Donald Trump says that Americans will feel some pain, what is he referring to? And really, what is his endgame when it comes to these tariffs?
Well, at least we finally have some recognition out of the president that tariffs are a tax on Americans. He had not been saying that for his campaign and up till now. Some of his advisors have, and of course they know it is. But now that the Americans are going to see prices immediately going up on almost all of their goods, they're going to realize, yes, this is a tax on them. And the president is finally admitting it. And now the president has said, well, this some pain that we're going to go through is worth it because we're going to become more self-sufficient. Well, let's see how that turns out.
And who do you think is going to feel more pain? The countries that tariffs have been imposed on, or the U.S.?
Well, it's certainly the countries where the tariffs have been imposed on, but because the U.S. is the larger economy, the U.S. can absorb tariffs more so than any other country in the world. So, of course, the other countries will feel more of the impact of tariffs from an economic perspective, but that doesn't mean that the Americans aren't going to feel any benefit. And the question is, why are the Americans going to be accepting of this increase in cost for nothing in return? That if the president can't make that case, he hasn't made it yet, then we'll see how long these tariffs actually stand.
And in the U.S. itself, Steve, who's going to be hit worse as far as businesses and consumers are concerned? What groups are we talking about here that are most impacted?
Well, look, the Canadians, the Mexicans, and the Chinese did this last time. They are going to target those sectors that are most important to the president politically. So they are going to be very strategic and smart in hitting Republican states. And those states tend to be agriculture, they tend to be energy. And so those, I think, are the sectors that are going to get the focus first from the Canadians and the Mexicans. Then we'll see what the Chinese end up doing, because, of course, they are going to retaliate. It is not going to stop with this, oh, we're going to take you to the WTO. That is not where the end game is for China.
Yeah, I did want to get your thoughts on that and why China initially made this move to say, okay, we are going to go to the WTO first, because they themselves haven't quite been accommodating of any sort of WTO cases in the past.
Yeah, exactly. But I think a couple things. First, the real pain is going to come to Canada and Mexico, not China. So let the Canadians and the Mexicans do the retribution first and watch and see what happens, because China's only 10% and it's a much bigger economy. So watch what the Canadians and the Mexicans do. It also gives you time to see what the Americans are going to do, because Trump isn't going to stop at 10%. He said 60% for China. Now, presumably, he's going to wait until the Canadians and the Mexicans and the Americans come to some settlement here, because those tariffs aren't going to stay forever. Then, when he hits the Chinese with those 60%, 100%, whatever the number is of tariffs, then China's going to come back with retaliation. And it's not just going to be a counter tariffs. They're going to retaliate in many other ways as well.
Of course, you are in Singapore at the moment, Steve. How are the other major economies in Asia sort of viewing this? You know, when you talk about Japan, South Korea, India, for instance, what's been the reaction, and are they preempting any moves, similar moves?
Well, look, there's only so much you can preempt. The countries that are most nervous are the countries with which the U.S. has the largest trade deficit: Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, and then you can throw in, certainly in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, in Thailand. So they are all very concerned. They're all trying to figure out, how can you show Donald Trump that they're taking steps to mitigate this trade deficit the U.S. has with them? It's very hard to do, but they'll try and see what they can do on the margins on that. And then a country like Singapore, which literally is one of the only countries in Asia, Australia being, in the Asia Pacific, Australia being the other one, where the U.S. has a trade surplus with them. The Singaporeans are going to get hit because they're a trading nation. And when global trade takes a hit, Singapore's economy is going to take a hit. So there's going to be direct impact on certain economies. There's going to be indirect impact, but it's going to hit everybody in the region.
And also, there are other targets in the crosshairs that Trump has just spoken about, and he's flagging tariffs on the EU and possibly the UK. How will the Europeans be playing their cards?
I've got to assume the same way that the Canadians will have done so and the Mexicans will have done so, is that they will hit the U.S. back with counter tariffs, and they will target the U.S. in the most strategic manner possible. If I were a resident of South Dakota or Louisiana, which happened to be where the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader are, tariffs are going to come to them because they want to pressure those Republican members of Congress, the leaders of the Republican Party outside the White House, to try and get the president to realize that the U.S. is not going to win a trade war with your partners and your allies. China's a different game. China has engaged in unfair trade practices against the United States for a decade plus, against all countries. Australia's felt it as much as anybody, China's unfair trade practices. China's different, but going after the EU, the UK, Mexico, Canada, Japan, Korea, that's a whole different ballgame, and the allies are not going to stand for it.
And Stephen, we've seen some jitters on the stock markets and the fallout to all of this in the past few days. Do you think this will be sustained? Would the stock market, I suppose, recover over time and see this as perhaps just a short-term knee-jerk reaction from the Trump administration?
Well, it depends if it's a knee-jerk reaction or if there's going to be sustained economic damage. Look, President Trump is one of the most powerful presidents the U.S. has seen, certainly, I think, since Franklin Roosevelt. And that's because almost all the guardrails have left. The president has got the Republican Congress in his pocket so far. The Supreme Court is giving him all sorts of authority. The media is not holding him to account like it should be. But what you have to hold him to account is the market. The market could be the last real guardrail against this type of policy, which certainly seems to be against U.S. economic interest. So, no, I don't think the market will snap back. I think the market is going to wait to see what the president does in response to what the U.S.'s partners and allies are doing.
Okay, Stephen Okun, always great to get your insights and analysis. Thank you so much.
Great to be back. Thanks.